There's a strange comfort in being alone. Not the kind of alone that feels like loneliness, but the kind that feels like freedom. The kind where you close the door behind you and for the first time all day, your shoulders drop, the noise stops, the performance ends. And in that silence you finally feel safe. But here's the paradox. The very thing that brings you peace also isolates you. The very walls that protect you also keep others out. And over time, solitude stops feeling like a choice. It starts feeling like the only place you can breathe. So why do some people feel safer alone than they do with others? Why does connection, the thing we're told we need most, sometimes feel like the most dangerous thing in the world? It's not about hating people. It's not about being broken or antisocial. It's something deeper, something rooted in how we learn to survive, how we learn to protect ourselves, and what we came to believe about safety itself. Today, we're going to decode the psychology of people who feel safer alone, the hidden mechanisms that make solitude feel like sanctuary, and why, for some, being with others feels like walking into a storm. Because the truth is, when you feel safer alone, you're not running from people. You're running from what people represent. Let's start with a question. Why do some people feel unsafe when everything's fine? You're sitting across from someone who cares about you. The conversation is calm. There's no conflict, no tension. But inside, you feel exposed, vulnerable, like you're waiting for something to go wrong. This is where the psychology begins. It's rooted in something called attachment style, the blueprint for how we learned to connect with others, usually formed in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where closeness was unpredictable, where love came with conditions, or where emotional availability flickered on and off like a broken light, your nervous system learned something crucial. Other people are not safe. Not because they're bad, but because they're unreliable. Because closeness meant risk. Because every time you opened up, there was a chance you'd be misunderstood, rejected, dismissed, or abandoned. So your brain did what it does best. It adapted. It learned that the safest place wasn't in connection. It was in control. And the only place you had full control was when you were alone. This is what psychologists call an avoidant attachment style. It's not about disliking people. It's about protecting yourself from the unpredictability of closeness. Because when you're alone, you don't have to manage anyone else's emotions. You don't have to perform, explain, or justify. You don't have to brace for disappointment. You just exist. And for someone who learned that other people's love comes with hidden costs, that kind of freedom feels like oxygen. But here's the deeper layer. It's not just about what happened to you. It's about what you internalized. Over time, you didn't just learn that others were unsafe. You learned that you were too much. Too sensitive, too needy, too difficult to love. So you stopped asking for things. You stopped reaching out. You stopped believing that your presence could be wanted without effort. And solitude became more than a refuge. It became proof that you didn't need anyone, because needing felt like weakness, and weakness felt like danger. Now let's go deeper. Because people who feel safer alone don't just prefer solitude, they build an identity around it. This is where the psychology shifts from behavior to self-concept. It's no longer just, I feel safer alone. It becomes, I am someone who doesn't need people. And once that belief takes root, it shapes everything. You start to see closeness as a threat to your autonomy. You start to interpret care as intrusion. You start to feel suffocated by the very things that are supposed to feel like love. Texts checking in, invitations to spend time together, questions about how you're feeling. Because for you, love doesn't feel like warmth. It feels like obligation. For them, calm doesn't feel safe. It feels empty. But for you, connection doesn't feel fulfilling. It feels exhausting. Here's the paradox. You crave being understood, but you don't want to be known. You want to matter, but you don't want to be responsible for mattering to someone else. You want intimacy, but only on your terms, only in doses you can control. So you keep people at arm's length. Not cruelly, not coldly, but carefully. You let them in just enough to feel connected, but not enough to feel trapped. You share just enough to seem open, but not enough to feel exposed. You care just enough to avoid loneliness, but not enough to risk heartbreak. And in the quiet spaces in between, in the moments when you're alone again, you feel relief. Because being alone isn't just easier. It's the only place where you don't have to manage the gap between who you are and who you think you need to be for someone else. There's a young woman who lives in a small apartment in the city. She has friends, she has a family who loves her. But every Friday night, when the invitations come in, she finds a reason to say no. Not because she doesn't care about them, but because the thought of sitting in a crowded room, making small talk, pretending to be okay, it drains something in her she can't afford to lose. So she stays home. She lights a candle. She reads. She exists without explanation. And for the first time all week, she feels like herself. But here's where the psychology gets darker. Because the truth is, people who feel safer alone aren't just protecting themselves from others. They're protecting themselves from what others might see. This is the shadow underneath the solitude, the part no one talks about. It's not peace they fear. It's what peace reveals. Because when you're alone, you can control the narrative. You can be whoever you want to be in your own mind. You don't have to confront the parts of yourself that feel unlovable. You don't have to face the fear that maybe if someone really knew you, the anxious thoughts, the self-doubt, the moments you feel like you're barely holding it together, they'd leave. So you leave first, not literally, but emotionally. You create distance before anyone else can. You disappear before you can be abandoned. You protect yourself by never fully arriving. And the cruel irony is this: the more you isolate to protect yourself, the more you confirm the belief that drove you into solitude in the first place. I'm better off alone. But that's not the full truth, is it? The full truth is, I'm afraid that if I'm not alone, I'll be too much, or not enough, or both. So you stay in the one place where that fear can't be tested. You stay where it's quiet. But here's what solitude can't give you. It can't prove you wrong. It can't show you that you're not too much. It can't show you that being seen doesn't mean being judged. It can't show you that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the price of intimacy. And the longer you stay alone, the more the world outside starts to feel like a foreign language you've forgotten how to speak. This is the rebellion, the quiet defiance beneath the surface. You're not avoiding people because you don't care. You're avoiding people because you care too much. And caring, for you, has always come with a cost you're no longer willing to pay. So where does that leave us? Because the psychology of feeling safer alone isn't a life sentence. It's not a flaw. It's not something to fix or shame or pathologize. It's a survival strategy that once made perfect sense. And maybe still does in some ways. But here's the hidden longing beneath it all. The people who feel safest alone don't actually want to be isolated forever. They want to be alone and loved. They want to be seen and safe. They want to matter to someone without losing themselves in the process. And that's not a contradiction. That's just what healthy connection looks like. It looks like being with someone who doesn't need you to perform, who doesn't punish you for needing space, who understands that closeness doesn't mean constant availability, and love doesn't mean losing autonomy. It looks like learning that solitude can be a choice, not a defense. That being alone can be restorative, not reactive. And that maybe, just maybe, the reason you feel safer alone isn't because people are dangerous. It's because you haven't yet met the people who make closeness feel like home. Because here's the truth, they don't tell you. You don't have to choose between connection and safety. You don't have to sacrifice yourself to be loved. You don't have to be someone else to belong. You just have to find the people who let you be both, alone when you need to be, and held when you're ready. And maybe the first step isn't forcing yourself into connection. Maybe it's being gentle with the part of you that learned to survive by staying small, staying quiet, staying safe. Maybe it's recognizing that the walls you built weren't weakness, they were wisdom. But wisdom also knows when it's time to crack the door open. Not all the way, not right away, just enough to let a little light in. Maybe the people who feel safer alone aren't avoiding love, they're relearning what safety feels like. And that takes time. But it's worth it.